Welcome back to the Big Purple Blob Morning Show, everyone. I am delighted. I am here with Susie Brown, and I'm Jenny Linton, and we are so excited to be talking to you this morning. I'm going to just toss it to Susie for a minute to introduce herself and what she does.
Hi, everyone. Susie Trish Brown. I am a parent and wellness coach, and maybe most importantly, a parent of a college student who has returned for the summer. And that is our topic today. We're going to be talking about we've sent our kids off. We got them enrolled in university. We sent them off, and now they're back. And what does that look like and feel like?
How are we going to navigate this? If you've been following along, Susie has done some about sending her son off and what had that been like, and now we're on the other side of that. What is that like? What have been kind of some key notable things as he's making that transition back from his first year of college?
Well, it's funny because they're still so reliant on us for so many different things, right? And partly, just the whole like, can I have my ticket and what date works well? And that conversation was not easy because, especially with international travel, you want to book it ahead of time because it's less expensive. And, using the education allowance fare, you have to go through, it's an official travel thing, so you have to go through your embassy travel office, and then just to nail down the date, because just because there's like a window for exams doesn't mean when the exams are. And then in this case, so much different from the winter break when he also came back, you have to pack up all the stuff and move out of the dorm room, and what that looks like without a responsible adult there to handle some of the details. And super interesting for us anyway, because our eldest doesn't drive. He doesn't have a driver's license. And a lot of foreign service kids, I think, fall into that particular category. But just to get his stuff and his roommate stuff, because they'll room it together again next year, into the storage unit, that was a logistical challenge.
Yeah. How did they do it? How did they manage that without a driver's license?
Well, thankfully, his roommate does have a driver's license, but it's not, they don't have a car or anything. And so U-Haul is not super excited about renting to 18-year-olds. So they had to get yet another older friend to sign and be the responsible party in order for U-Haul to sign them the truck. And they had, that short window, because I think you can pay for particular hours or whole days, depending on the package that you pay for. And they just had to be on it. And it's not like their exam schedules meshed up, right? So my eldest's exams were after they have this pack out fiasco. Oh, wow. So he has to balance packing up all the stuff, loading into the car, his roommate leaving, and then he's still there in this now empty room because he still has exams. So it's just, it's just a logistical, isn't everything we do with foreign service a logistical challenge? And so it's good that they have to figure this out.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot. And that's a lot on a newly minted adult to be figuring all that out, especially because there's probably kids who do have parents who are coming and able to help move them out, and yet they're kind of on their own and no driver's license and all the things that our foreign service kids have.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. When I look back, when I think about, leaving my dorm room, and obviously this was not exactly like last year or anything, but it was hard, but my mom and dad were there. So it wasn't that bad. And I lived close enough that I could make multiple trips, pack up a car, take it home, come back, pack up a car, take it back. But now, it's not like you can do that. It's not like you can take, 12 suitcases on an airplane.
This is like a one and done. You got to get your stuff out in one. That is challenging.
Yep.
Wow. What was his response to that? Was he stressed out by that?
I think he really appreciated the challenge, and it was a kind of a nice distraction because he had turned in a number of his assignments, final assignments, which were papers, and so it was kind of a break before the next bigger exams. Um, but he's also fairly organized. I mean, both of his parents are fairly organized, so thankfully he picked up on that gene. But two, like I think most humans do, well, I should say many humans do really well when they see that there is a deadline, right? They have to accomplish task X and they have to do it by date Y. And so, what do you need to do in order to get that done? And for him, that was just something like, okay, though he is a procrastinator. So, there were a few extra boxes, like smaller boxes, that ended up at our friend's house in Northern Virginia. But nonetheless, like it's
Very
mostly
close.
successful.
Wow. What has it been like having him come back overseas for the summer? How has that gone?
Well, he's still, I mean, it's fairly recent, but it's funny because when you have multiple kids, like they kind of, there's a reason why there are, older kid persona stereotypes, middle kid persona stereotypes, and younger sibling types persona stereotypes, because like a lot of those characteristics actually, like you see them often. So that's from where the
It's
stereotype
true.
springs, right?
True stereotypes.
And so it's just really fascinating that when he left to go to university, the middle kid kind of started to assume some of those, like, well, I'm the eldest at home, so I now do that. That is my job, and some of those jobs maybe aren't. Um, some of those jobs are like picking on the younger one much more, or like bossing people around much more.
Oh,
These
interesting.
were things that he was on the receiving person on before, right? And so
Uh,
now he's at the other end, right? I should say all year he was at the other end being the boss, and now he's back to middle child, and it's just super fascinating. But also
do you
like
see the middle one reverting back to his role, or do you see
not
him
not
still
smoothly, not
like,
smoothly.
okay.
Yeah, it was a quick shift, and it's not so quick back. And I mean, who can blame you, right? No one wants to be,
Yeah.
no one wants to be the younger brother or the younger sibling. But it is, we're also happy he's back. It's nice to, it feels like the family's whole again. And that's putting a lot of pressure on like one person's shoulders, but like, I mean, you get used to your family unit, especially I think overseas, and you've probably seen this, like overseas, your family unit gets so tight
Mm.
because you are your unit, right? You don't have grandma and grandpa, and you may or may not know your neighbors. They may speak a different language, and so you just get really reliant on that family unit. And then when a piece of that unit um, goes 10 and a half hours away, then like it's a little hard to stay as connected as you'd like. So it just kind of feels like a sigh of relief.
To have everyone back, and
Yeah.
interesting to hear how those normal patterns that you'd had for so many years shifted when he left, and then there's an attempt to shift back to the way it was, but it's not super smooth. There's resistance there. That's really interesting. Makes sense.
I wonder if it's different with girls versus boys. I would think there's a lot more communication, and
Mm.
um, there's not that same amount of, because they don't necessarily, with three boys, they don't necessarily stay as in touch as
Mm.
um, maybe girls might, and so there's a little bit more like reintroduction, for lack of a better word.
Sure, that makes sense. Something that I obviously don't have a child who's come home from college yet. That's in another year, but one of the things I've seen with clients is just saying sometimes they've not only run into that with their siblings, but also with their parents too. That while they're the college student while they're away, sometimes discovers things about themselves, or they become this kind of new adult, and they come back and there's expectations from the parent that they're going to still follow family rules. They're still going to participate in everything. They're still going to run the errand for mom or dad or whatever it is. And the college student is saying like, hey, wait, I'm not your minion. I'm not your at-home child. You know, I'm my own self. And there's sometimes that conflict, which I think is true not even overseas, but it can certainly feel even more so overseas because they've been away so long. We're so excited to see them, right? Or we expect them to have seen this as well, where it's like, oh, so and so's home. Now we're going to travel. And you come home and they're needing to decompress. And yet the family's like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go travel. And they're like, like it's just go, 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 go. So some interesting dynamics in that transition.
Totally. And they've changed and grown so much while away from us. So, I mean, sure, like we talk and chat all the time, but it's not the same thing as like being there day in, day out, hour in, day, hour out. And so those changes, like they don't come back and as the same. Even, I mean, duh, of course, it's been a year, right? But like
Yeah.
nonetheless, it just feels like, wow, like you really are much more independent and you're not doing what I'm saying. And what is happening here?
Did you remember you're the child and I'm the parent? Oh, wait, but I know now we're on this adult page.
Right, exactly.
That's super different. Have you have you felt like your son has come back with more maturity in terms of perspective?
Yeah, I mean, yes, especially because he hadn't really spent as much time around Americans per se, other than like his embassy, the embassy families. But now he's immersed in that, right? And so he understands some of the perspective and examples and statements that we might make. Whereas before he didn't have personal experience with that, it was just like, well, that's what mom and dad said, right? And so I think that helped him. All of our kids, and I think this is probably fairly common for foreign service kids, is they have a very global view. And we don't always go back to the US for breaks and R&R, obviously home leave, yes, but so we haven't re-engaged in Americana as much as maybe we could have. And I don't know that that's necessarily wrong because we've certainly explored many, many, many corners of the world instead. But I do feel like he's realizing a lot of where we're coming from because he's been living there much more. And like having to be responsible for a lot of like, buying the food that's in their fridge and having to, make sure that he has winter clothes because he was coming from a tropical country and having to be responsible for these things that like before like we always took care of. That
Yeah.
takes a lot more like forward thinking, and I think that helped him realize you can't just be, well, I want it so I'm going to get it, even though that's much more fun, right?
And mom and dad will order it because we can't really buy it here anyway. So it'll be taken care of. It'll arrive at the embassy at one point. Yeah. Like he's having to do all that himself.
Darn it, Amazon is so freaking convenient. And unfortunately, he has access to it.
So he's learning to be responsible on your Amazon account.
Exactly, which doesn't really take that much forward planning.
That's interesting. That's interesting, both the executive functioning part, but also the piece about America, because we do talk a lot about how we have different roots than maybe our children who grow up abroad. And that's interesting to hear him maybe starting to grow some more of those roots, American roots, and engage with that and see what he thinks about that and understand maybe more from your perspective. That's very, very interesting. Very interesting.
So we had been chatting before we started recording, and one of the things that I think a lot of any parent in the foreign service with a child over the age of 15 has the joy and privilege of taking care of the overseas overseas hiring program, overseas seasonal hiring program. I'm sorry, I can't remember the
Yeah,
acronym
something
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
So your child is taking part in that as well.
Mhm.
And this, so here at Post, so my eldest this will have been his, he did, let's see, this will be his fourth summer, and then he did two winters as well. One winter, I don't know. It's been a
Okay.
number of times that we've had to fill out the same forms because they don't save the forms at all ever. So you have to
This would be a good change.
highly recommend you photocopy that form before you let your son turn that in or child turn that in, because that's a nightmare. And then you have to do all the tax forms, you have to do all the things. And the way they did it this year for kids over a particular age, they got to do like a full secret clearance. So I have to do all of the clearance documents, the fingerprints, the everything. And let me just tell you, those security clearance folks are not super patient with that form not being turned in exactly when they say they want it turned in. And of course, this corresponded exactly with the end of coursework and the beginning of exam time. And so it was just like, you really have to turn that in, and 10 and a half hour later, he wakes up and he's like, oh, I stayed up too late studying. So I mean, I'm sure I remember even when they were in the household, it's like, oh, can you just turn it in? Can you just email the form here? I photocopied it for you. Just turn it in.
That is so well, and you bring up such an interesting point too, where when they're at college, you've got like the time difference too, and you're like on this deadline, and you don't want to wake them up. They need their sleep for the exam. But oh, that is stressful. Yeah, we also had a lot of stress over the forms at our house, and I believe there was a few tears shed as well as we were filling them out, and yet it's a really cool program. I last year, my oldest worked in the public diplomacy section and loved it. She got to help write some cables, and I'm very also edited and supervised by multiple other people, but got to help write some. She got to help write a speech for the ambassador. She got to help deliver some humanitarian stuff, and she got to do a speech at the America Center, and it was a really meaningful experience for her. She's interested in going into that field, so it was really fun for her. And I was pleasantly surprised, as I was kind of expecting mainly like filing and stapling and type of stuff. So that was really cool. And yeah, I know there was a broad experience. A lot of other kids were just filing or moving boxes or whatever, but it was a really positive experience. What have your kids, how was their experience been at their embassy work?
I think so unfortunately the first 2 years that he did it, first was under COVID, and then the second one was our economic crisis here. So he did not get like super fulfilling experiences those 2 summers, but he did shred a lot of things. and
Necessary.
he and then and we were moving to a new building, so we had to get rid of like a lot of the the surplus paperwork.
Yeah.
But then even the second year, even though he was doing it virtually, he got to work with the econ section, the economic development section in our aid mission here. And it was really, he learned a lot about economics and development work, and how different projects and aid can make like a meaningful difference.
Yeah.
And so that was really fascinating for him. And then he worked with protocol, and then he worked, which was not as exciting as you would think, but there was a lot of he learned a lot about like different sorts of relations that the front office might have with different people, the stuff that they get, the invites that they get, all of the heavy lift that the protocol offices do. And then he's also worked with the mailroom, which he loved. Like he
That sounds
loved it. Because I mean, part of it is like, you are busy. You are, from the minute you get there till the minute you leave, there is stuff to do. But then also like, just like, it's not office work. You spend time with people who are curious about you and want to talk and chat, and go out and get the bags from the airport and bring it back. So it's a lot of opportunity for interaction. And this year they've changed the way they do it. They kind of assign them for jobs instead of to a specific office. But my other child got to work in the CLO office and he loved it. And he made a trivia contest and he did a book sale and just got to do all sorts of fun things. So I think I love the summer hire program. Please don't get me wrong, the forms are tedious, but like we all think that about employment forms. But I do think that, our kids wouldn't be able to work otherwise. Like how else would they have that
Right.
employment experience? And the salaries aren't amazing, but they're still salaries, right? So you can start their investment. If you're planning on doing that, you can like just help them understand, no, day starts at 8 o'clock. Yeah, I know you stayed up late, but still gotta be at work at 8 o'clock.
Gotta be
It's
contributing.
good. It's a valuable lesson, just a valuable life lesson. And I do think that I've really appreciated that for the kids. Our youngest, unfortunately, isn't old enough, but that means I have to come up with something for him to do, not pawn it off on someone else.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is. I agree with you. It sounds like your kids have been able to work in all sorts of different areas in the embassy too. It seems like in addition to the advantages, like you've mentioned, of like having a job and getting to try out these different things, I just love too that they've spent so much of their life overseas representing America and this embassy. It's cool for them to get to have this insight into the inner workings of what goes on in this building that they've been overseas for all these years. And I think that was a really positive experience for my daughter too, to just be like, yeah, I know what dad does. I know what our family's doing here, but I don't know that she knew the ins and outs of what actually happens and what does that mean. So that was really cool too, to just be like, oh, I know what it means to be a diplomat now.
I agree completely. Like it's such a it's just like this idea of what mom and dad do. I mean, as is the case with most kids as they're growing up, right? But then as they finally start like going and seeing what each of the offices do, that's really eye-opening for them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad your daughter had a great experience in public diplomacy. I'm a little biased, but I do think it's the best office in the embassy. But I mean, all of the offices can offer really valuable learning lessons.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. No, it's a big blessing. Well, congrats that your son's back. He made it through his first year. Hooray.
Hooray!
That is awesome.
This will be you too very soon.
We're getting ready. I'm gearing up for senior year college applications. We're starting the process that y'all just finished a couple of years ago. So
It's like a full-time job.
sounds like it. The way the international schools make you think about it is a full-time job.
Yeah, no, I did a lot of like research and everything into it, and I really appreciate the experience that he had through that first year, but that whole application process that is a thing.
Well, I will be re-listening to those podcasts as we start out on this journey.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this conversation, talking about college, our college first year, coming home and experiencing re-entry into the family, re-entry into job again, and just like what it feels like to have successfully completed 1 year of university. And this will be an ongoing saga, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone can follow kind of at least for those of us who are coming behind you, get a few tips for the road.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone.